if you know, but it's not an apocryphal story, but Elijah Muhammad said that Baltimore is the only city in the United States that he couldn't organize. And that's a true statement too. He said it's very difficult to organize the black community in Baltimore. It's a complex story, but it really coincides with the black communities throughout the world, and I'm not exaggerating that. In the past few months, I've been to England, France, Jamaica, Australia, and every place I go, I see black communities that are in trouble, and that includes Baltimore. So what I've got to do as a social scientist is say, why is it that black communities throughout the world, throughout the United States, and specifically here in Maryland and specifically Baltimore, why are they in trouble? And for me, it's because of how white supremacy works, that it distorts our views of ourselves, it distorts our views of the world. Health conditions in the United States and specifically Baltimore, which has one of the worst health problems at a lot of different levels, issues of HIV/AIDS, STDs, so forth, are similar to those of the Aboriginal people in Australia. You've got crime, you got drugs. So I can start looking as a as a psychologist, I can start saying, well, it's just something wrong with black people all over the place and all black folk in Baltimore are messed up. Or I can look at a bigger analysis and say, why is there such similarities in some of the pathologies that we see here in Baltimore and we see all over the world? Black boys in Baltimore in trouble, but black boys on the east side of London, where I was 2 months ago, are in trouble. If I close my eyes and I could distort the accent of some of the brothers in Hackney in London, it would sound just like brothers in East Baltimore. So it's a similarity, it's a global similarity about the conditions of black people. Well, broken homes, the fundamental organization that any nation has is its family. That's the smallest group that we have. Black families in Baltimore are broken, but you got to look at the history of that. You got to look at the history. I think sometimes we kind of fail to connect the dots. The African family, since it was first kidnapped from the continent in 1441, when the first Africans were extracted and stolen out of that continent, has been broken. Fathers were sold from their wives, and their husbands were sold from their wives, children from their parents, and so forth. In Baltimore, you have the same breakdown. I tell people right now, we're seeing the first generation of parents who were born during the age of crack, which to me was roughly from 81 to about 85. Those people are in their mid-20s now and they're having children. So you can see the family structure from one generation as a result of the epidemic of crack in the early 80s, how it's affected this generation. So in Baltimore, you have what Dr. Joy Leary calls intergenerational trauma, that this is not just the current generation, but go back 2 or 3 generations to the Great Migration, and even before that, right after the Civil War, and definitely during enslavement, you have broken families. And if I could, people say, well, if you could wipe out one thing in the African American community in Baltimore or any place else, what would it be? People would say, well, we should wipe out drugs, we should wipe out alcoholism, homicide. I would wipe out, the one-parent family, that we would have husband and a wife intact. And that's, if I could just have that, it would clear up a lot of these other issues. We're growing a generation of young men who don't know what being a man is all about. They see it, what they perceive in hip hop, and I have nothing against hip hop. I'm a big fan of hip hop, but they don't have the role models that they need in their communities in an intact black family. Now, I'm not unrealistic as a psychologist to know that if you constantly, degrade a people the way white supremacy has, you will find single parent homes. But it doesn't mean that we have to stay that way. What we've got to do is teach young men and young women what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman at a very, very early age. I call my book The Warrior Method. A lot of whites objected to it and a few blacks objected to it because a warrior, it means that there's a war going on. And it doesn't mean that you do the offensive, but I think a warrior protects the family. He learns how to deal with things that are attacking the community. And I think that we need to grow and raise warriors, boys and girls, to understand how white supremacy works, understand their contribution to the community and what they can do to make it better. And a lot of times, maybe I shouldn't say this. There was a sister, you may need to believe this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I was driving to work to do this interview this morning. It was a sister on the radio from Baltimore, and she has a business about hair extensions, and the name of it is Goldilocks. So as a psychologist, I said, okay, this is a black woman selling black extensions to black women, but her business is called Goldilocks. So the attack on black folk is not only physical through police brutality. We're right at the 20th anniversary of, Rodney King getting beat up. But it's not just the physical assault, it's the psychological assaults, how we think about ourselves. Why do we have a black business called Goldilocks that deals with hair? That would be like a white business having, doing white women's hair and they call it dreadlocks. It just doesn't, something's wrong with that. But I think that we have adjusted to the abnormality of our situation and we make the abnormal normal, which is not good. So it's how we think. We've got to think differently about who we are and where we are in this whole system of white supremacy.
My name's Mark, I'm an alcoholic.
Dorothy T., and I am an alcoholic.
For so long, alcohol has sort of been there for me to sort of see me through social situations.
Drinking was more important than anything else.
My journey in AA started years ago when I reached the outside limits of my desperation.
I really wanted to quit drinking, I just couldn't stop on my own. And I remember when I woke up on the day that I got sober, I felt something inside of me tell me that I could go to AA.
These people, just gathered around me. That was the fellowship in action in my life.
The moral of my story today is that AA has never let me down, ever.
If I carry any sort of message with my story, it's that, keep coming back and that this thing does work.
If you have a problem with alcohol, contact AA. It works.
So the doc gave you prescription meds. Use them as directed and you're good to go. Misuse them and things can go south, fast. It's easier than you think to cross the line. Maybe you take a few extra pills, thinking you'll get your boots on the ground faster. Or mix meds with alcohol, or use a leftover prescription, or share meds with a buddy. And misuse can quickly turn into abuse when you take meds just to get high. Random drug tests don't lie. If you pop hot, you could be looking at a discharge, loss of benefits, and worse. There's a lot to lose when you misuse. So take your prescription drugs responsibly. It's a thin line between use, misuse, and abuse. Don't cross it. Learn more at armythinline.org.
Baltimore, to me, occupies a unique place in studying how racism destroys a community. when I grew up thousands of years ago in Cleveland, Ohio, Baltimore was the place to move. I remember in the 6th grade, my best friend, Larry Sanders, said his father was moving to Baltimore. We were excited because Baltimore at one time had the highest per capita of black businesses owned in the nation. It was called the city of white steps because people painted their steps white and cleaned them off. And we used to see this growing up in Cleveland. This was way before the internet and stuff like that. So when he moved to Baltimore, we saw that as like, wow, this guy's really, and when he moved to Baltimore, he did well. So I say, if that was in the 60s, what happened in the past 40 years? You don't have to look back 400 years or 100 years. What happened in the past 40 years? And I think we see the crack epidemic, the advent of AIDS in our community, diseases and stuff like this. We see Johns Hopkins. If you read Medical Apartheid by Sister Washington, that we see how the presence of a great medical institution, Johns Hopkins, does not guarantee great health for the citizens of that community. They're not correlated with each other. And we have to ask ourselves those questions. Why did it happen? What happened to Baltimore in the past 40 years? Jawanza Kunjufu, who's a colleague of mine, he says that black women raise their daughters and love their sons. And I know he's caught a lot of heat for that. But think about what he's really saying. Black girls are raised. I mean, let's be honest, and brothers have hard time. Black women usually are more functional when they are 21 years old than black males are. I think that black mothers raising sons alone know the danger that their sons are in, and they tend to protect them more. And they protect them in ways that oftentimes are dysfunctional ways. I was at a movie past weekend, and this mother was there with two her little children. I'm not sure she should have been at the movie that she was taking her two, and they were little. The little boy may have been about 5. Daughter looked at about 6. The daughter was sitting down in the seat, no problem, quiet, eating a little box of popcorn. The son was just running around in the theater before the movie started, and she said, "Come back here." So I said, well, why isn't the daughter running around? Because the daughter has learned something that the mother has transmitted to. I think that black mothers oftentimes, release the apron strings a little bit later with boys. I've had several, as a psychologist, I've had several men and women come to me with a man is entering the life of a mother who has children, says, when I got there, her son is sleeping with her, and he's 7 years old, and the mother will defend that, and I'm not saying that it's inappropriate for a son to sleep with the mother, but not at 7 years old. And this is not some unusual case. It's a case I've heard a lot. So I think that it's difficult. Black men and black women have to dialogue with each other about the trauma that they've undergone in a system of white supremacy that dates back generations to enslavement. Again, Joy Leary calls it the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And we have to understand how it works. And when we do understand how it works, we know how to take action against it. But it's there, it's there. Well, see, if I was a white supremacist, I know this is a hard thing to imagine, but if I was a white supremacist, like Dr. Frances Cress Welsing says, the first person I have to deal with is the black male. You've got to get rid of the black male. Like Dr. Welsing says, in chess, white moves first. And the object of the white chess pieces is to capture the black king. And if you look at throughout history, I'm talking about biblical history, secular history. The attack on the firstborn male is something that is thousands of years old. So what you've got, you know, like T.I. says, it's not rap music, it's trap music. You got conditions, you attack the black father, you criminalize young black males at very young ages in a variety of ways by putting them in special education when they're 6, 7 years old. Children who I've seen black males in special education that are as smart as I don't know what, but they act out. You create a European-centered educational system that makes them discipline problems. And then you don't give them jobs, like summer jobs. I was talking to somebody the other day, I forget where we were talking about, it was my mailman, and we were talking about how when we grew up, I was a paper boy. And you had guys that elevators didn't have push buttons. You had a guy in there doing the elevator. You had little black kids on the summertime. We would shine shoes on the corner, haul groceries from one place to another. None of those jobs are there anymore. Only 2 states of the union, New Jersey and Oregon, have people pumping gas. I remember that was the summer job. A brother said, "What you doing this summer, man?" "Oh, I'm pumping gas." And if he cleaned the windshield, the guy in the car might give him a tip. That was his. So you create a situation, like T.I. says, of trap music, deprive young black men of their livelihood and all of this stuff. So you got a witch's brew that inevitably people are going to get on drugs. They need money to live on because this society demands that you got to have money. And they said, well, you can sell drugs, you can pimp, you know, and all of this stuff. So you have the pathology set up at the beginning and link with the, you know, white male privilege that we see every day that they don't have. They get adjudicated. Young black males get adjudicated differently. Once they get to in front of the judge, they get more severe sentences. We know this. You know, the whole crack cocaine, powdered cocaine thing. So it's a trap system, and I always tell people you gotta stand, like Chancellor Williams says in The Destruction of Black Civilization. You got to have a view from the bridge. And Williams says that we need to stand in the middle of the bridge so that we can see where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And many of us are standing at the foot of the bridge. We don't know where we are in the first place. And I think that those epidemics of drugs are inevitable given the situation that we see right now. I mean, I was in South Africa a few years ago, crack epidemic in South Africa. Crack did not come to South Africa until Nelson Mandela was freed from prison. Now, was it put there accidentally? I don't think so. The AIDS epidemic in Africa came there right after the fall of apartheid in the early 90s in that region of the continent. I don't think that stuff was accidental. But then you talk to people about that, they say, oh, you're being paranoid, you're giving attribution to things that aren't historically connected. That's not true. Stuff is all connected. Is designed, black people are, you know, young black males without mothers in their families, without fathers in their family, have a higher rate of being involved with criminal behavior when they grow up. It's just the way it is. You know, I have a brother that was in prison for murder, and my mother and father was there, which said, well, aren't you contradicting yourself? Not really, because the circumstance, I think that me having a father in the home helped a great deal, but there's no guaranteed protection because of the relentless, unrelenting onslaught of racism in our, you know, the environment that I was raised. And this is years ago, before Baltimore, before the crack epidemic. You still are subject to, in fact, I don't know any black families. I'll be honest with you. None of my friends, I don't know any black families that has a close relative that is either not on drugs or a close relative that has not been incarcerated, male and female. I don't know any. Now, white folks you can get that with, but not with black folk, particularly Baltimore, because Baltimore, and see, Baltimore, I got a sister friend of mine here. She says this stuff, and I don't like saying it, but she says it all the time. She says, Ray, she said, you got to think about what happened in this state. And it is true. the eastern shore of Maryland is flat. And that's where it was the #1 place where they bred our ancestors in this country. And it's sold all over the country. And the reason why it's flat, because if our ancestors ran, they could catch them. So you read the histories of Fred Douglass, Harriet Tubman, all of these folks, Eastern Shore. Her claim is that the inbreeding and then the fact that Washington, D.C., where you were free, was only 30 miles away, 40 miles away. Why didn't black Baltimoreans run to freedom in D.C.? There were black folk who ran from Mississippi to Pennsylvania. Why couldn't we go 40 miles? And her argument was that Maryland was set up, and it was, as a breeding colony for white people to breed black people, farmed out almost exactly like Walmart opens up stores, and that this strong history of just crazy broken up families, if I were to point to a place where it occurred most, it's here in Maryland. It's the state of Maryland. That we had problems all over the country, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. But in this state specifically, there was more violence perpetrated on the black family than any other state in the Union. There's no doubt about that. When I was teaching at Fisk when I came here in Nashville. You know, all cities got drug problems to a degree. And when they called me to, they recruited me to come to Morgan, I did all the research I could about Baltimore, and when I came here, it was fascinating to actually see the level of drug addiction, how neighborhoods are often defined by the drug that is sold in that particular neighborhood. That's unique to Baltimore. And I love this city, don't get me wrong, I love Baltimore. I came here I think the year that The Wire opened up on on TV. And when I looked at it, it was really interesting because it was kind of, people either loved or hated The Wire. We brought, what's his name here, Michael, what's his name, that played Omar. We brought him here a few months ago, and he was telling us about, just a couple months ago, in fact, and he was telling us about his character, Omar. And it's funny now, you can go on the streets and he said, man, you hear people yelling, little kids yelling, Omar coming. Like in The Wire, or, I'm gonna Omar you. And see, it's amazing how that has gotten into the popular culture. So I was surprised. I had been around and working with drug addicts and dealers. What has surprised me about Baltimore's drug culture more than anything is who runs it. And I ain't going to go on record about that, but we know who run it. This institute we know who runs it. And they're virtually untouched. David Simon probably touched on it more than anybody else when he did The Wire. But it's amazing how the politicians in this city will not speak. They'll speak up about the consumer, the brother on the corner boys, or the dealer, but where does it originate? They don't talk about that. They don't talk about that.
How do you change history? You can change history by walking and marching. You can change history by speaking and teaching. You can change history by taking a stand or taking a seat. But the best way to change history is when you becomes we. We tore down that wall. We marched for equality. We made sure that love knew no boundaries. Now you can become we right here in Vancouver. We can end HIV. We can change history. It begins with a test. Testing today can range from a blood test that'll inform you in about a week to some locations where a prick of the finger gets you a result in 60 seconds. Diagnosing HIV early changes everything. It prevents the virus from attacking your body, and it prevents it from spreading through our communities. All each of us has to do is step up and take a test. Changing history is that simple. Testing centers are available throughout the city, Or just ask your doctor at your next regular visit. And if your doctor offers a test, say yes. It's just the responsible thing to do. Then, share the word. Tell people that HIV treatment has changed. Tell people that testing has advanced. Tell people that the entire approach to HIV is different now. Let them know that by choosing to take a test, we can all end HIV. This is a fact. We are so close. But to become we've got to have you. We need you to do your part. We need you to share the word, take the test, join the movement. End HIV. Change history. Learn more at itsdifferentnow.org.
Well, it's similar to all over the place. Young black males are over incarcerated. They're overrepresented in the juvenile justice system. I haven't had lunch with somebody yesterday. The average time that a PD, a public defender, sees a young black male when he is, gets connected to the criminal justice system is a little over 3 minutes. So this guy the young black male could be looking at 10 years for something, and his public defender has seen him for 3 minutes, and is looking at the case while they're getting ready to go in the court. That's not equal justice under the law. So places like Jessup, I spoke at Jessup to the brothers there just a few months ago, and these young brothers always come up to me, Dr. Winbush, I read your book, I read this, blah, this, I said, well, what you in here for, man? And then they'll say, oh man, Dr. Warren, I don't want to tell you. And I'll say, no, you can tell me, And then they'll give some offense. They got caught with 2 ounces of marijuana and they sold it to an undercover police officer, something. And then they in jail for 5 years. And see, the white boys don't go through that stuff. And so young black males are over adjudicated. Many of them are punished by being sent to Hagerstown rather than Jessup because Jessup is closer. And then we got like the case of Isaiah, what's his last name? Couple years ago, a 14-year-old beaten to death by counselors at one of these juvenile facilities. So even when they get in the facility, they're not safe, not only from other inmates, they may not be safe from the people who are supposedly there to guard them. Isaiah Simmons' case. So it's bad, and it's getting worse because the economy is still spiraling. I mean, and black males still are not being hired. And I right now refuse to be on committees. I could name a prominent politician in this community. I'll leave his name out of it. And he wanted me to serve on a committee that dealt with young black males in the city. And I said I would only do that if you talk about jobs for them. And see, he didn't want to do that. He said, well, I can't guarantee jobs. I said, well, then why are we going to have a committee? Because those things are all, and the research shows, you get a young man that's working and making money, has a sense of self, they don't do crime. Keep them in school, tutor them. They don't commit crime. So why am I going to serve on a commission that talks about helping young black males and we can't offer them jobs at the end of the thing? That's playing games to me. And then how much money we spend. And see, I'm so tired of people citing these data. It is a fact. It costs more to house, I think in Maryland it's $23,000 a year. I can go to Morgan for that, Coppin for that, University of Maryland, Howard, whatever. But this society plays games with the idea it will tell you that we want to help black males, but then create systems that do the exact opposite. One of my colleagues at Penn State, he uses this term, Mr. I mean, I don't use the term, he calls it Mr. Nigger. He says on one hand, we're Mr. because we're black male citizens of the United States, so that's the Mr. part. But we're nigger when it comes to how we are actually treated, how we are humiliated, how we are arrested, incarcerated, adjudicated, imprisoned, all of that stuff. So it's like that fundamental contradiction about what happened. Like, I don't want to get into it, but go ahead, that's all. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask them, but I'll tell you this. I got a call. I got to put this carefully. I got a call from the president of this university, and a few weeks ago, the mayor of the city introduced a bill she was going to introduce some kind of legislation to tighten up the possession of handguns. It was right after the shooting that took place in Arizona. Well, everybody every time a major shooting like that, people start talking about that stuff. Well, so you're going to tighten up the use of firearms by people, which means that you're going to be incarcerating more black males, because that's who got the guns. But why not tighten up those who sell the guns to them? Why not say, if you sell a gun to someone that is, that has a mental problem, history, a criminal record, you conduct a poor background check, you go to jail too. They won't do that. Now, we'll do that with drug dealers. The guy that sells the drug has a chance of being a Jew, but not with gun runners. And so I told the president, I said, you can do this, but you're contributing to the incarceration of black males. So they wound up changing the bill slightly. So again, I see this thing about, we say we want to help black males, but when it comes to public policy, there's a gap between it. And I guess as somebody who works with public policy and politicians, we got to close that gap between what you say you are doing or what you want to happen to black males and black people in general, and what you are actually doing in terms of public policy. I think that ex-felons should be able to vote. I'm against the death penalty. I'm in Maryland, so that helps a little bit. But when you say we're going to put these men in jail and then we're not going to let them vote after they get their rights, that's something that stays with them for the rest of their lives. That's cruel and unusual punishment. So I think there's always been a gap between what elected officials say they want to do with black males and what they actually do in terms of the formation of public policy. Well, I always ask my students when we're talking about, the state of black America, I always ask them, was it illegal for an enslaved African to steal a chicken on a plantation during slavery? Is that illegal? And my students say, what are you talking about? I said, if you were on a plantation and you were enslaved and your family was starving or very hungry, is it illegal for you to steal a chicken? So they say, so we'll get the debate going, because clearly in an unjust situation, people are going to do unjust things. It's just, it follows that. And so being a repeat offender, Nat Turner was a repeat offender, okay? Sojourner Truth was a repeated offender, and the biggest repeated offender that we've had in the state of Maryland is a sister by the name of Harriet Tubman. She went down south 200 times and grabbed black folk, so she was a repeat offender. Nelson Mandela was a repeat offender. Dr. King was a repeat offender. So I'm not sure what people mean when they say repeat offender. I think civil disobedience in an unjust situation is justifiable. Clearly, if a brother is selling crack cocaine, pimping a sister or something like that, that's, quote, illegal. But again, I've got to, as a social scientist, analyze the entire situation. I can't just say, let's focus on repeat offenders, because I can make an argument that a lot of great people were repeat offenders. What I got to do is say, why did that situation happen? I've got to ask that question, why? And most Americans don't want to ask the question why. And I'll tell you, see, when we say black males are in trouble, we always talking about those repeat offenders, the corner boy selling drugs in East Baltimore or something like that. To me, Barack Obama, the guy that lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, is in trouble. Just because you're a black male and you've achieved the highest office in this country doesn't make you immune from the onslaught of racism. So I think that when we've got to analyze the system of white supremacy and look at what this system creates and does to us, that makes us do certain things, that forces us to do certain things. And if we don't, we fail in our analysis. We fail in our analysis. I mean, you know, I always say there's three Malcolms. There was Malcolm Little, Malcolm X, and El Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. If I looked at Malcolm Little, I would call him a repeat offender, incorrigible, troublemaker, thief, pimp, hustler, dope dealer. He called himself that. And I could have stopped there. That history was used against him after he became Malcolm X. Well, weren't you a criminal? Yeah, I was a criminal. He owned up to that. I was in prison. Nelson Mandela was in prison. But you gotta look at what were the circumstances that these men got in trouble. It was a trap. And it's amazing how when white boys get into the same trouble, how they get exonerated and justified for what they do. You know, I've been looking at the white boy down and killed that Natalie Holloway woman, that Dutch guy. I mean, if that had been a brother that killed a white woman, they would have had him dead years ago. But he's been allowed to kill twice now and got away with it, or is getting away with it. And, you know, I don't know, it's just a discrepancy in how this society treats black people in general.
My name's Mark, I'm an alcoholic.
Dorothy T., and I am an alcoholic.
For so long, alcohol has sort of been there for me to sort of see me through social situations.
Drinking was more important than anything else.
My journey in AA started years ago when I reached the outside limits of my desperation.
I really wanted to quit drinking, I just couldn't stop on my own. And you know, I remember when I woke up on the day that I got sober. I felt something inside of me tell me that I could go to AA.
These people, you know, just gathered around me. That was the fellowship in action in my life.
The moral of my story today is that AA has never let me down, ever.
If I carry any sort of message with my story, it's that, you know, keep coming back and that this thing does work.
If you have a problem with alcohol, contact AA. It works.
I'm here for my flu shot, and I understand that there are options for people who are 65 and older.
There are, but you don't look 65.
It's very flattering, but you know who I am. What if I said, who's the boss of my health?
You've never seen Who's the Boss. My boss is in the back.
Flu season is here, and people who are 65 and older need to ask about the vaccine made specifically for their age.
Judith Light, come on back.
Visit the National Council on Aging at ncoa.org/flu and talk to your doctor about vaccine options for people 65 and older.
Black people have been selling drugs for a long time. I mean, I was growing up, it was heroin, we call it, I think in Baltimore they call it heroin, but it was heroin in Cleveland, around the country. Weed, whatever. I think it started off as a need, and then you start seeing the rewards that come with that, the cars, the money, the women, and so it becomes a want. I want to be like that, and stuff like that. Well, you know, so the brothers are right. It's hard to like tease out which one it is, the want or the need. you know, how much money is enough. Given their circumstances or our circumstances, it's no wonder. See, when they see Diddy and Rick Ross a month or so ago rain, I don't know if you heard about this down in Florida, they rained in 1.5 hours, I believe it was, $1 million at a strip joint. You know, so young black men hear that. He got $1 million worth of $20 bills, and Ross and Diddy rained the money to the crowd for an hour and a half. They hear that stuff, and they want that. It's you know, Thorstein Veblen, the European sociologist, calls it conspicuous consumption. When you get something that you think symbolizes that you're upper class or, you know, way up in the stratosphere. So we know that the 67% of designer liquors are consumed by black people. Courvoisier, Chivas Regal, all of them things. When Barack Obama got elected, I think it was Seagram's that created one called Seagram's 44, because he was the 44th president of the United States. And black people were the 90% of those who consumed bought this bottle, which is something like $50 a bottle. So we see Diddy sporting a $5,000, $10,000 watch. We want to be like that. And the interesting thing is this: if Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, two of the richest white Americans, came out to a press conference, had shades on, a $20,000 diamond on his pinky, and a big fur coat, and some Versace suit, you would say, what's wrong with Bill Gates? He must have gone crazy. But when we see our people doing that, we okay about it. You know, and that's something's wrong. We need to look at, you know, what's wrong with that picture. One of my friends, Jabari Nachur, his little daughter just did this video. It's a letter to Lil Wayne. It's gone viral on the internet. And she just asked Lil Wayne, right here in Baltimore. The little girl just simply is asking Lil Wayne questions. That's all she's doing. She's not condemning. She said, tell me what I need to do when you say this about black women. And they said Lil Wayne don't know how to answer her. You see, so we've got role models that are, and I'm not saying talking about all hip hop or athletes or anything, but we got role models. You know, I was very upset last year when Waka Flocka was the students at Morgan said we want him to, you know, be the act. You know, because I said we're rewarding stupidity, because he's stupid. You know, and this is what our young black males are saying: be stupid. You know, the want and the need. Did he need to reign? And Rick Ross, did they need to reign $1 million in an hour and a half at a strip joint? You could have put 4 students through 4 years of college and maybe a master's degree at Morgan with that kind of money, and been more productive. So I don't know. I think that, like Tom Burrell says in his new book, Brainwash, he's the biggest advertising black exec in the history of this country. He called me a couple of weeks ago, and he said there's been a 500-year advertising campaign that inferiorizes black people and makes us hate who we are. A 500-year campaign, and we see the results of it right now. Boy, that's a tough one. It's not a tough question to answer. The answer is no. And I'm not sure that black kids in public school systems throughout the nation are being, you know, served educationally. To me, a good education for a black child is to teach him or her who he or she is culturally. I can teach a child anything if I teach them who they are. The Baltimore public school system, historically, we did a study here. In the early 1900s, Baltimore there were several immigrants from European countries, Eastern European countries, coming into this city, and the entire public school system adjusted itself so that they could teach those European immigrants, because they needed them to work the docks. Why can't they do that culturally for black kids? You're graduating, and it's always under dispute in this city how many black folk are graduating from high school. I've heard anywhere between 20 and 30%. We don't know what the numbers are. Those are some of the most mysterious numbers that in this city. The scores are improving, but I'm not sure that's a measure of good education. I think that you have to give black children a cultural vaccination at an early age. Just like I made sure that my 3 children had their vaccinations for measles, mumps, rubella, whatever, when they were 5, 6 years old. You got to give the same thing culturally to black children when they're young. You give me a child who knows who he or she is at 5 or 6, that they know who Harriet Tubman is, or like the little girl, Jabari's daughter, who did the Little Wayne video. You give me a child like that, I can teach them anything. Algebra, history, physics, calculus, whatever. They got to know who they are. And many kids are going through public school systems here in Baltimore. They don't know who they are. And it doesn't mean they're all failing out. They aren't. But I always say that a lot of black students in Baltimore and other inner cities are undergoing a form of educational abuse by the time they graduate from high school. And then we've got to undo, when they get to places like Morgan or Compton, we've got to undo that 12 years of educational abuse that they've received in a public school system that Jeffrey Canada calls a dropout factory. You know, it's a surprise that we graduate as many students as we do in this city. Baltimore has one of the highest rates of black adult illiteracy in the nation. I believe the numbers are 27% of black adults in this city are functionally illiterate, meaning that they really cannot read at a functional level. And that's because of their educational experiences that their parents may have undergone and they underwent. I always tell people the 2 great things about the United States, and here I am talking about, is the First Amendment, freedom to say what you want to say, and the public school system. Those are 2 very unique things in the United States. Have they honored both of those? Of course not. You know, we know there's no such thing as free speech. We can see what happened. If Dr. King were alive today, he'd probably be thrown in jail for some of the things he said. But the charter school movement really accelerated under George Bush in his attempt to destroy the public school system. And I've had these mixed emotions about charter schools because the shirt I got on is a charter school. On the one hand, I think the public school system should be able to educate all black children. In reality, it doesn't. And the fact of the matter, we know that in charter schools, children are getting, in general, not all the cases, a better education. What is also exploding in the black community is homeschooling. There's a major black homeschooling association where black parents are tired of the public school system. The mothers are there by themselves, or they'll get a group of mothers that they will teach their own children in their home. Those kids are doing well. Kids in charter schools are doing well. That doesn't mean that the public school system shouldn't be approved, but I think part of the explosion of charter schools in this country is a backdoor attempt at destroying the public school system. And black folk got to be aware of it. Do I support charter schools? I haven't spoken at a lot of them. I got mixed emotions about it. I think they're good and bad. You know, sometimes I don't know, sometimes I think white supremacy gives us poison on a sugar cube. So we say, wow, this tastes good, you know. But it's in the long run, it's going to really hurt us. Dead Prez has a vibe called The Wolf, and they talk about this seal. When Eskimos want to catch a seal, they put a knife in the carcass. Catch a wolf, they put a knife in the carcass of a dead seal, and when the wolf comes up to the thing, it licks the blood of the seal, and it keeps licking it. And what happens, it cuts its tongue. And so his blood, the wolf's blood, gets mixed up with the seal. So the wolf bleeds to death. And I think that's how charter schools are. You know, they look good. They work by and large. But are we really just licking the knife and we're cutting our tongue? Because, while we're supporting charter schools, there's a part of us that's destroying the public school system. And at the same time, if I'm supporting charter schools, I'm going to turn out probably a better student than I would in an ordinary, typical public school. It's, again, how white supremacy puts us in these untenable dilemmas, and it says, now you're going to make a decision. And there's pluses and minuses to both of them. And the charter schools are man, they're coming up every place. This one right here, Tree of Life in D.C., I spoke there a couple years ago, and they gave me this T-shirt. And, I mean, those kids are learning. I mean, they're smart, they're bright, and everything else. And I said, well, why? They got motivated teachers. Why can't there be regular public schools like this? And there were in this country up until the urban rebellions of the 60s and 70s. And that's when white folks abandoned the inner city, moved to the suburbs, said, y'all can have those schools. And they went to pot. And I graduated public school my whole life in Cleveland, Ohio. Excellent education. Public school. So when I grew up, public schools were the place to go. Now they're not. Now we got to do charter schools, and then you start, and you don't know what to do because you go to these charter schools and the kids are learning, but you say, well, why can't that happen over here? It's a double bind. That movie, a lot of teachers said it was an anti-teacher movie, Waiting for Superman, but I went to see it. And Canada is doing in Harlem what everybody in the United States ought to be doing. But, Canada got a $70 million a year budget. You give me $70 million, I educate all of Baltimore's kids. He gets money from private industry. And charter schools get a lot of money from private donation, which means that you're again destroying the public school system. It's a double bind. I try not to sound jaded and cynical, but look, there's a lack of black males every place except, NBA, NFL, prison. So then we say, well, we're going to do the thing. We're going to say, why aren't there any black males in the public schools, in the classroom, teaching kindergarten 1 through 5, whatever. I always tell when I'm on college, when I was teaching at Vanderbilt, I always told they said, we can't find any black males. And I said, well, why we need to put the football and the basketball coach on this admissions committee because they know how to find black males. So I think, and don't get me wrong, I think that Arnie Duncan, Spike, and Jeff stuff is good. But they got to again ask, why aren't there any? See, I'm always asking why. Maybe because I'm a psychologist. Why aren't there black males teaching K through 12? Why? And if you say, well, we just can't find any. Why can't you find any? Well, because they're in jail. Why are they in jail? I'm going to why you to death like a child does. And you got to get back to the core thing, that this society views black men as what my colleague calls Mr. Nigger. We want you to teach. We're going to start this campaign. The Secretary of Education is going to start a ad campaign to put black males back in the classroom. But at the same time, they're putting black males steadily in prison. You can't have them both. You got to decide which one. They're not putting white males in prison the way they put. That's why we got white males in the classroom. Brothers have been educationally abused. And so why would they then want to be a teacher? I mean, if I've gone through a system, it's like being in prison, and you say you serve your time 8, 9 years, and somebody at the end of the thing said, well, look, we want you to be a prison guard. You don't have nothing to do with the prison. You already been there. You don't want to do that. So, you know, we're going to abuse you educationally, and then we're going to ask you to be a teacher. You want to get away from that system. And so black kids have to learn, and black males have to learn to love their schools. And then we see the schools that are doing it right. Like, I can't think of the name of the academy in Chicago. It's a charter, no, I think it's a public school. They have a 100% graduation rate of black males, which is outstanding, and 100% of them go to college. Now see, whatever they're doing, I don't care what you tell me, Arnie, Duncan, Spike, or Jeff, I need to go to that school and say, what are these people doing? Second year in a row. Second year in a row. So what are they doing? And if Malcolm X Academy in Detroit, I've been there, 100% graduation rate, I think 85% of black males going to college. What are they doing? And whatever they're doing, forget about the white experts and all that stuff. I need to do that in Baltimore Public School. I need to do that at Fred Douglass, Douglass High. I need to do that all over Forest Park, because whatever they're doing is working. And I maintain the reason why, HCZ, Harlem Children's Zone, is doing so well is because Jeffrey Canada cares. He loves his students. And a lot of these teachers that I see, they don't love their students. Not all of them, but a lot of them don't love them. And you gotta love, I love what I do in terms of being an educator. And I think it's partially reflected in how many students have studied under me, gone on to do their PhDs and done great things. I hired one of my former students in this department a year ago, because he was doing well or did well after he got studied under me. So I think teaching is something that you gotta love to do. You can't like it. You can't say, well, I can't do nothing else, I'm gonna teach. You gotta love teaching. And I think those who love it, it's reflected in their students. And you've already seen these scandals that are around the country, that stuff. It happened in Atlanta 2 weeks ago. A whole school, they caught them because they knew that. And see, some of this stuff, I was in Philly a few weeks ago, and this mother got up and said, instead of calling it No Child Left Behind, we ought to call it No Child's Behind Left. Because what you're doing is creating pressure on the teachers to pass these students, because the teachers want a job and they're laying off teachers. And this stuff that's going on in Wisconsin, that's a shot across the bow to teachers. So what you got to do, we're doing things in a system now that is illegal. Pass the test. But is the test that important? Now, they're not doing that in Chicago, at the academy in Chicago. They're not doing it at Malcolm X Academy in Detroit. Why don't we find out what they're doing so teachers don't have to fudge the student score so they can pass, so that they can keep their job? It's a system. It's a trap. And Neely Fuller talks about the fourth stage of white supremacy is the stage of refinement, when racism becomes just refined. It's like you can't even tell it's racism and you doing it, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. I just read about, Nicki Minaj and how after she got her injections in her butt, now it's a big thing. Black women are illegally and dangerously injecting their butts with silicone. And one person has died. She flew over from England to get her behind looking like Nicki Minaj's butt. And, this is insanity. It's insane. We're going crazy in a system that's already crazy. And when teachers say, look, like you said, move to 62 and 80, that's insane. Something's wrong. And what we got to do is begin to understand what's wrong and correct it. If we don't, we're going to keep, this system is dying. White supremacy is dying all over the world. We know it is, but we still think somehow we're part of it and we got to do what they tell us to do and we don't. There's alternative ways.